Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Ayala coming live from his dining room with the American Colonists Fight Back, a Mr. Ayala presentation. As always, please make sure to be writing your notes as we go along, and of course, to answer the vlog question down in the comments, or as we say, the doobly-doo. Please sit back, make sure to write your notes, and complete your comments by the end of this video. And as always, don't forget to be awesome. So, to start off, we're going to start off with the end of the Boston Tea Party and how they started enraging the British. Because of over $1 million of tea being dumped into Boston Harbor, in 1774, the Intolerable Acts, a set of laws to punish the colonies, was passed in the British Parliament. And there's a couple of parts to it. First, the port of Boston was closed until the tea was paid for. Very difficult to pay for tea when you aren't allowed to get your items in, because most of Boston made their money through trading and merchant vessels, so that's an issue. They banned the committees of correspondence, the idea of people sending letters back and forth to give out information. They tried to ban that. Didn't work too well. The colonists have to house soldiers wherever they are located, also known as the Quartering Act. Had to put soldiers inside of their houses to feed, clothe them, and make sure they're happy. And colonists could also be arrested and then shipped to Britain to stand trial. So they lose their right of a trial by jury. So in September of 1774, the colonists decided to act by calling the First Continental Congress. All the colonies, except for Georgia, sent delegates. And the reason that Georgia didn't send delegates is they didn't have time to actually get a delegate up there by the time they got the information. So, three things started. First, they voted to ban all trade with Britain. A boycott was put into place. Two, they began training troops. So they started getting together, and all the militias of all the different colonies started getting together to make the Continental Army. But they still did not declare independence. Really, they wanted just to get these taxes repealed and have Boston Harbor reopened. It wasn't all about actually leaving the British Empire yet. So, colonists thought the boycott and a show of force would work. No, it failed miserably. So what happened was spy networks on both sides started to grow. So what is known as the Midnight Ride by Paul Revere. So a blacksmith and a guy named William Dawes, with the help of their spy networks, found out the British were moving to Lexington and Concord. And they were moving to Lexington and Concord because they wanted to try to capture some of the major Sons of Liberty, some of their organizers of the Daughter of Liberty, some of our ammunition and our artillery, and also to kind of just show that Britain would not be pushed around. So these two riders, with the help of other ones, warned that the militias, that the redcoats were coming. They didn't yell the British are coming, because remember, that would make no sense. They're all British. That's like running around in the U.S. going, the Americans are coming. Everyone just looking around and be confused. So, it's the redcoats are coming. So, Lexington and Concord are known as the first battles of the Revolutionary War. And a poet once wrote about this battle that it was the shots that would be heard around the world. We'll go through the battle animation in class because it's a little bit easier to discuss and understand. Americans had to choose sides. There's actually three major sides. The Loyalists, those who supported the British. The Patriots, those who supported the rebels. And the third side were people who were neutral, who more or less were like, please leave me alone, don't burn down my farm. Which, it's about 30% for every group. This is intentionally left blank. Next one. Militiamen began to surround the area around Boston. After the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and so what happened was, so Boston's in this little flat plain, and around it are these hills. So what they did is they started putting men all the way around those hills. And the British were like, oh, we got to go in the city, or we're going to lose this. So they retreat back into the city. The Americans attacked Fort Ticonderoga, which is up in upper state New York. It's led by Ethan Allen and his backwoodsmen known as the Green Mountain Boys. And what they did, they took all this artillery and dragged it over frozen land all the way to Boston. But that's for another story. From there, we get to the Second Continental Congress, which also meets in Philadelphia, and there's three things that they start. First, they form the Continental Army, led by Mr. George Washington down here, a Virginian planter, also later become the first president of the United States. They start printing out paper money. Instead of using British pounds, they started using American paper money. And it also started to work like a government. They started making laws, making decisions, doing stuff that our government today now does. So, after, sorry about the jump cut, but anyway, so after the Second Continental Congress meets in Philadelphia, we begin at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was actually on Breed's Hill. Weird story. So what ended up happening is the militiamen have these hills overlooking Boston, and General Howe, the British commander, orders attack. Howe, the British commander, knows that if he doesn't remove these Americans from Bunker and Breed's Hill, that they were able to rain down artillery and cannons onto the city, which no one really wanted that, including the Americans. But the Americans also had very, very little ammunition. So Colonel William Prescott, one of the militiamen, decided that he was going to use this strategy. Don't shoot until you see the white of their eyes. So don't shoot them until they get really close to you. So even though the British end up winning this, it shows that the militia can and will stand up for to the professional British Army. Lexington and Concord was kind of a wash, but and then the Battle of Bunker Hill, even though the colonists lost, it showed the British that this is going to be a long, dragged-out fight. This is not going to be something that's going to be quick and easy. So in July of 1775, Congress sent what is known as the Olive Branch Petition to London. And what the olive branch symbolizes is peace. It's a symbol from ancient Greece that says, hey, let's become peaceful, let's stop this fighting. King George III at this time just absolutely refuses. He's kind of going crazy, he's got a little syphilis going on in his brain, and he's also very much in debt because of the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War in Europe. So instead of actually deciding to take this petition and try to make peace, the king instead blocks all American ports and sends the Hessians, which are German mercenaries, to America to fight on his behalf. So not only is the king completely ignoring the ability to make peace, he actually increases the tension by sending more troops and more navy, and actually sending German mercenaries, which are people who are bought to fight for someone or paid to fight for someone, to the Americans. So in response, General Washington decides that he's going to prepare to invade Canada, thinking, hey, if they're going to do that, we need to attack Quebec. So he sends a gentleman named Benedict Arnold to seize Quebec. Fails miserably. Not very good at this offensive war thing. Defensive, completely different story. So what happens is those cannons that Ethan Allen captured a few slides ago from the Fort Ticonderoga, I'm sorry, not very good at that name, are dragged over the mountains to the heights over Boston. So through the snow, in the middle of winter, Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys drag these cannons all on slids through the up over the mountains, frozen lakes in the middle of winter, to the heights around Boston. So what would happen is that Boston's down in this little, like, bottom part of the bowl, and on the top, like the edge of the bowl, is where all the American artillery was kept. But what's interesting is they had very, very, very little ammunition, maybe 1 or 2 cannonballs per each cannon. So the British go to sleep that night, they look out the mountains, oh, nothing really going on. They wake up in the middle of the morning, and all of a sudden, all these cannons are pointing at them, and they're like, whoa, where did those come from? Be aware, we're really good at that. So the British begin to retreat from Boston because of the cannons. Because those cannons could literally rain down on Boston, on the ships in the harbor, and destroy most of them. So more or less, the British had a choice. They could sit there and be destroyed and lose Boston, and Boston be burnt to the ground, or they can run and save their army and their navy. So they take the sensible option and they run. Then from there, we get a man named Thomas Paine, who's a Scots immigrant, who writes with something called Common Sense. And what he does is he states that all monarchies were inherently corrupt, because it's all about the person, it's not about the people, which is against John Locke's social contract theory. Keep that in mind. And why did he write it? Well, he wanted to help convince Americans to call for independence. Because we still haven't said we don't want to be part of the British Empire anymore. We just wanted them to stop taxing us and doing horrible things to us. But what he does is he brings a lot of those neutral people onto the patriot side. And Congress, at this time, still doesn't know what they want. And then Richard Henry Lee of Virginia asks for a resolution to be passed to become independent. He takes that bold step. So with the help of Thomas Jefferson, Richard Henry Lee, and Thomas Paine's common sense, they draft what's known as the Declaration of Independence that was written by Thomas Jefferson. On July 4th of 1776, Congress adopts the Declaration of Independence. So more or less, it was like, hey, we are no longer part of the British Empire, and then a list of grievances or why we decided to leave the British Empire. And the Declaration of Independence was all based on John Locke. And Jefferson stated, just like John Locke, that once a government disregards human rights, then the people have the right to abolish it. Just like we talked earlier with John Locke. The idea is that you give up your freedoms to make a government to protect your rights, your freedom, and your property. And if they don't, then it's your right as a citizen to get rid of that government, vote someone else in, abolish it, revolution, whatever you need to do. And Thomas Jefferson's right there with it, but this writes it in a way that's easier for us to understand. So, your vlog question for this one, please respond to the vlog question in the comments, aka the doobly-doo down below. What do you believe was the biggest achievement of the Continental Congress? Explain why. There's a whole bunch of them that are embedded in this vlog. Please make sure to write that down. Make sure you got your notes written. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.